meeting is being recorded.
That's never happened before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, usually it says, it's recording, but then you don't get the second one saying it's being recorded.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Way to Wow show. I am your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every week, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time and 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and then an hour in. And my guest today, I'll introduce him in just a minute, is you're on Central Time, right? So it's...
Indeed. Yes, I am.
What is it? 2:30.
2:30.
Right, there you go. So just want to mention that you can see past episodes of the show on our YouTube channel. Just search the way to, you can go to youtube.com/C as in channel /The Way to Wow, and you will find the Way to Wow channel. And we have all of our episodes. Somebody told me earlier today we have 99 episodes. So I guess you are the 100th episode. Wow.
Awesome. What an honor.
At the beginning and here at the 100th anniversary. So some of the episodes that you might like, some of the past ones include, I did an episode back in March on how you can use LinkedIn to connect with the kind of people that you'll want to know in order to get the kind of job you want or start the kind of business that you want. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It's a step-by-step process for doing it to expand your network and meet, interesting people who are in the field that you want to be in. It's the best way that you can enhance your professional prospects. So just want to throw that in there. And I don't want to take any more time away from talking to my very long-standing friend, Bob Sanders, Dr. Bob Sanders, who is, all my life, well, not all my life, but all the time you've been a doctor, you've always been a dive doctor, and I guess you still are, but now you are a flight surgeon as well. So Bob was one of the first guests I had on the Way to Wow show. And when he shared his philosophy of just say yes. And I have said that so many times since then. I just love that. I just love the whole idea behind it. If you haven't seen Bob's first episode, I encourage you to go to our channel, search Just Say Yes. That's how I titled his episode, and take a look at that. And you can hear about that. And I asked Bob to come back because we were talking, I guess this is going back a few weeks ago now, and Bob said, "Hey, I've got a new job." And I'm like, "Oh, what's your new job?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to be training the Artemis astronauts to walk on the moon." Like, what? So, and it was, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's because, this opportunity came your way and you just said yes. So first of all, Bob, welcome back to the Way to Wow show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kevin. It's an honor and a pleasure to be back. I do enjoy any time I have to speak with you. It certainly enhances my day. But more than that, I think it's a great opportunity to build on some of the things we've talked about and some of the purposes of your show in taking advantages of life and opportunities and how that can help you grow. In fact, I think that we can also touch in with LinkedIn and this idea of selling yourself and the importance of that in one's career, no matter what the career may be. Yeah.
So tell us, before we get to what you're doing now, give us just kind of the if you don't mind, because this will somewhat repeat a little bit about your first appearance. Why don't you give us kind of the Reader's Digest version of your career progression so people can get an idea of, you didn't start as a flight surgeon at NASA. I don't think most people do that, right? You had a path to getting there. So summarize that for us, if you would.
Wow, I thought we only had about a half an hour in this show. My degree is great, because we'll take the first half just in my career path. I've had quite an interesting path. I was a scuba diver, learned to scuba dive in high school, and that was always a passion of mine. But my degree from college is in theater. My first job was at the Metropolitan Opera, where I worked as a technical intern on the artistic side, the development of art and putting it on stage. But throughout that time, I was still passionate about scuba diving and teaching diving on the weekends. I then worked in Paris for a while, came back, worked in set design and construction for commercial photography in New York. And then when that dried up, an opportunity presented itself to follow my heart in diving. And throughout the time I was in New York, I was working as a research diver in Antarctica in short stints, going down for 3 months at a time to work as a research diver. So then I came back to LA, where I grew up, and worked as a manager in a dive shop, and really got to build a lot of my sales experience and really mastering that communication with the public, which has helped me throughout my career. Then continuing to go to Antarctica, I had an opportunity to work as a first aid person for the film and television studios. Now, I was passionate about EMS. I'd worked on an ambulance in college. I was still ski patrolling. So I loved that first aid. I loved that emergency care. I'd volunteered, actually was volunteering one day at a fundraiser for the Catalina Hyperbaric Chamber. And there I met a gentleman that I had lectured with, and he said, "Oh, there's a scholarship. If you want to get training, you should think about that." Again, this opportunity threw itself in my lap. The application was due the next day, so I had to pull an all-nighter to get it done, but did, and had this scholarship and learned to become a hyperbaric chamber technician, and volunteered with the Catalina Hyperbaric Chamber in Los Angeles. And that really got me to learn more about diving medicine and starting to see some of these glass ceilings that I had reached, how I wanted to learn more. I knew I was capable of learning more. So then finally, and I had actually also taken another stint where I spent a lot more time having the opportunity to work with you when I ran the City of Beverly Hills CPR Training Center, taking lead from the film and television studios for a year. And that was great. And I learned more about emergency care, and I learned about public service, and I learned about fundraising a lot more. And that also helped me throughout my career. Then I had found, though, I had achieved so many things at a certain level, but if I wanted to take the next level, if I wanted to go to the next step, I kept hearing, "Oh, go back to school and complete this degree," or "Go back to school and get a hard science degree." My wife was a criminalist for LAPD and fascinated by what she was doing. And when I looked into that, because I had a hard science background, having been pre-med in school, well, we can't really put someone on the stand who's got a degree in theater. That just won't hold the sort of emphasis it needs. So go back to school and get a hard science degree and we'll hire you. So I realized it was time to go back to school. And it was a question of, how do you go back and do it? What degree do you go for? There had never been a time where I didn't see myself happy and effective as a physician, but I knew I wasn't ready at the time to give up in life what one needs to give up to become a physician. At that point, I knew that I needed a change, so I was willing to give it a shot. So I took the opportunity to apply to medical school. The first year, I ended up with about 22 rejection letters, a nice stack. One day we'll come back and tell you about the one I got from your alma mater, because USC's was quite an enjoyable rejection letter. Then I found myself at a school reunion, a college reunion. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should just talk to the pre-med director there. And I did. And again, taking advantage of this opportunity, Williams had said, "Hey, once you graduate from here, you're always a graduate. Our career counseling is always available to you." Now, that never dawned on me here. For 10 years, I'd never gone back and never asked them for help. But now I thought, gee, maybe it is time to. And wow, what an incredible guidance I got from them. It's just like I was still in school there. And that really helped me. And in fact, it was because of that guidance that I found I was applying to the wrong schools. And all of a sudden, going from that stack of rejection letters to the acceptance letter I got to go to medical school. So in 2001, I went to Chicago Medical School, and my career definitely took a different path. I now was focusing on emergency medicine, got into one of the top emergency medicine residencies at the University of Pittsburgh, trained at the University of Hawaii in diving medicine, and still managed to be a dive bum throughout my career. I was working in emergency medicine and undersea medicine, kind of splitting my time, when I made one mistake in my career, which was following a paycheck rather than following my heart. And that led to a little bit of a bumpy job, but that also brought me into a situation where I learned about the opportunities at NASA. So in 2014, I started at the large pool where we train astronauts, NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab, became the medical director there a year later, was there for about 8 years, and really took advantage of all the opportunities to learn. And it meant for some sleepless nights and some late nights and taking on more than my share of the work. But by doing that, I found I became more and more indispensable. And then when a new position opened up at NASA as a federal flight surgeon to become the program medical officer for all of spacewalking, EVA, and human surface mobility, lunar rovers, it was very clear that was an ideal fit for me. And then in September of this year, I started as the program medical officer for EHP, which is EVA and Human Surface Mobility Program.
Wow. So I want to, before we get into that more sort of forward-looking piece, there's a few questions I want to ask you about your career journey that hopefully will illuminate your progression for the viewers. So one of the things you mentioned is you have a theater degree, and how, you know, being on the stand, you know, like going, what is your degree in theater? On the other hand, I had another guest on, I think a couple of months ago, who also had been involved in theater in the early part of his career. Actually, I've had two guests who were involved in theater. One of them got later into training, first of all, police officers, and the other one got into promoting whiskey brands. So, you know, I know one of the bartenders who was on the early part of the show, she became a spirits brand ambassador as well, and she had a background in musical theater, right? So I'm wondering, you know, how do you see this time that you spent in theater, the time you spent earning a theater degree, how do you see its impact on your overall career progression? Because you mentioned it kind of, well, you know, you need something else. I'm wondering, is that the only way that it ever impacted you?
This is an excellent question. And I think it gets to the root of so many struggles in many careers today. And that really comes down to communication and understanding how people think and how to connect with others. Theater absolutely teaches about connecting with your audience. And that's real important. You want to take them on a journey. You want to control their emotions and guide what direction their journey goes. So many of the careers that exist today, you learn a new language. I've heard that in medicine, in your first 2 years, you'll learn 50,000 words about medicine. And yet the human usually only uses about 1,800 words in a year and has a lexicon of about 12,000 words. The total amount, your total language is about 12,000 words. And we learn 50,000. So I don't think that it's doctors don't want to communicate with their people. Their patients, or engineers or lawyers. It's just when we learn a new language and we speak that language day in and day out, it almost becomes hard to remember our native language. The time I spent in theater, which really learned about that connecting with people and how to take them on a journey, I have never lost that thought. When I worked in sales in the dive shop, it was very important to learn who your client is, learn who your customer is, and be able to connect them and understand what their real needs are and what they're really looking for. It's not about making a sale. It's about taking your customer and getting them to what they really want and what they really need. And then you have that happy joining. When I worked for the film and television studios, I was doing paramedicine, pre-hospital care, but still needed to be able to communicate and be able to help people understand what they're dealing with. And then becoming a physician, again, what is one of the hardest things that we find in medicine is doctors speak and med speak, and they speak in a way that their patients don't always understand them. And I never gave up that ability to connect, that ability to help people along this trail. And so as a physician, as a caregiver, I've made sure I speak in plain, clear English that anyone can understand. But I think that is why theater has helped so many people in their careers. It's just that understanding and not giving up that communication, that connection.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it in that context, and yet it makes all the sense in the world. I will say that one of the challenges, for example, people coming out of the military has is like with medicine, law, et cetera. You have this whole language, and people have a hard time communicating with, their fellow civilians now, right? And it occurs to me that one of the recommendations I could make is for them, take an acting class where basically you're immersed in this environment where you have to learn to connect and communicate with this other person, and you have to be you're taking yourself somewhat out of yourself, if you will, right? You have to sort of be this other. Yeah. Another question I have is, several times you mentioned that you volunteered to do things that then later you were able to engage in professionally. So what led you to volunteer and to devote your time, for no compensation, right? That's what volunteering is. What led you to do that? Was there a sense that sometime in the future you might, do this professionally, or what guided you through your volunteer work, I guess is the question.
It's an excellent question, because this is something that I really struggle with in society today, how volunteerism doesn't play the same role in so many people's lives that it did when you and I were younger. I did grow up with a family who was committed to volunteerism, whether it was active in the church, active in my father was very active in child abuse centers and trying to help nonprofits succeed there. So I saw the importance and understood the role that volunteerism can play in other people's lives. But also, I learned early on the rewards that come with volunteerism. I was very passionate about teaching. We met, you were volunteering at a CPR training center, and I saw the enjoyment that you got out of teaching in that scenario and thought, wow, that could benefit my life. I was still in high school, so I wasn't in a situation where I needed to work or where that would compete with earnings. And I thought, gee, I would like to be able to do this, to share, to give other people the ability to save a life. And really saw how much that added to my life. And not only the rewards of the teaching, but the rewards of teaching for other than monetary purposes. In college, the ambulance service that I worked for, you volunteered your time, you got paid when you were on a call. So again, I knew that the community needed an ambulance service, and it couldn't afford to staff 24/7, 365, paying paramedics what they're worth. So if it weren't for volunteers, then the community would be hurt. So I did that. And then all of a sudden, that put me in a situation where I got to know security, usually because it was trying to get out of parking tickets, because when responding to calls, I would park wherever I needed to park. But all of a sudden, they offered to pay me to teach their guards CPR. So it is something that I did it because I wanted to and because the rewards were personal, but just saying yes to opportunity, other opportunities presented as, I guess, good karma, if you will, that came out of it. The time I spent at the Catalina Hyperbaric Chamber, I was just very passionate about first aid and about diving. And wow, I could go work at this facility as a volunteer, but I could learn, I could improve my diving medicine skills. Through my time there, I got to be a diving medical technician and actually made contacts that got me involved with LA County Sheriff's Department and their dive team. So now I was in a situation where I was doing something that I enjoyed, that I felt passionate about, but it also helped me learn to put me in a better situation when professional opportunities came along. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I had no idea when I joined the Hyperbaric Chamber that it would help guide me on this path to diving medicine. But I met and worked with someone, a physician, Dr. Jeff Sipsey, unfortunately he's passed away, but who probably has treated more scuba diving accidents than virtually anybody else in the world. And so having that contact, having that ability to learn from someone of that level because of a volunteer opportunity was just incredible. And that's this whole just say yes to opportunities, because you don't realize where they're going to take you. But if you have passion for it, if it's something that gives you rewards, you're not going to lose. You only stand to gain from it.
So again, interesting. Earlier today, I was speaking to a service member. I volunteer for this organization called Veterati, and basically what they do is they connect people coming out of the military with people who are already out who can mentor them. And what I find is, the people I speak to are very grateful that, I will take my time, right, to speak to them. And I said to the young man that I was talking to earlier today, I said, you're welcome, sincerely so. I said, I think what you and the people I speak to through Veterati don't understand is I get at least as much out of these conversations as you do. The kind of enthusiasm that he has for this transition that he's going into, and how he sees the potential of his life. And I would guess he's probably in his late 20s. It really gives you a boost, right, to talk to them. And I found that was the case throughout. Like you, I grew up in a family where you volunteered to do stuff. My dad did all his life. And I especially with teaching, I find I seem to get more out of it than the students do, which either means I'm a terrible teacher, right? Or I think there's something sort of, emotionally or spiritually satisfying in helping someone learn something new and seeing that light go on and that kind of thing, right? And I think there's lots of, when we think of volunteering now, I think it's too often volunteering for some kind of cause. And I'm not sure if that's the most nourishing kind of volunteering that we can do. Just volunteering for the sake of helping other people seems to me to be more reward. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
That is actually fascinating when you talk about volunteering for a cause, because you said that and it's like, wow, I think about television shows or like you said, volunteerism today. And so much of it, you're right, it is for a cause. I also find that sometimes people choose a cause because it makes them feel like they're part of something when they may or may not really believe in it or have a stake in it. We come from a time where volunteerism was more of a norm, and you volunteered because you want to help out, you want to give back. I think you talk about teaching. Are you a bad teacher? Well, I'm sure there's a few people walking around there because of the CPR that I perform that show that you are not a bad teacher in any way, shape, or form. And I have to agree, I don't volunteer for a cause per se. I'm trying to think of any causes that I've really gotten involved with, and I haven't. It's programs that I believe in, things where I can help others, teaching, wow, you're right. That the sense of reward that you get when that light goes on, when you can share a passion or build a passion in someone, there's nothing like it. And if I could do that, if I didn't, it would be great to not have to need to work. So then I, not have to earn money. It's wonderful, the emphasis of the show, but we all know that we do. And yes, I earn money so that I can continue to volunteer, and not volunteer for a cause, but volunteer for a people, for a person, for helping others.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the other through points I think I picked up on in your story is, I don't know if it's a drive, if that's too strong a word, but certainly it seems to me growing, or having opportunities to grow. And I think not just professionally, but holistically as a human being, that seems to be a consistent theme in your professional career. So how does that strike you? I mean, am I picking up on something? And let me just add to that real quickly. If it is, was that intentional, or is that something that just kind of happened? How did that play into your career up to this point?
Your second question, I think, is the more powerful one. We say, was that intentional? It's fascinating. So the gentleman that I work with at the Catalina Hyperbaric Chamber, Carol Huggins, he's the program manager there. He has seen me from the conceited little Williams graduate who got the scholarship, and you've known this all along too, who, wow, look at me, I'm great, I got this scholarship, to getting beat down enough times in life to becoming a physician and onward. And it's fascinating as I look back too. You asked, these opportunities, this desire for growth, is that intentional? And the answer is no, that never was. Though it's something that I know is part of me, and I love to learn. And so the just say yes to opportunity, just say yes to learning, just say yes to trying something new. And not everything that one tries, one necessarily likes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone skydiving again after the time we went back in the early 90s, but twice was enough. I didn't need to continue that, although I'm really glad I did, because how many people have I talked about skydiving to?
Absolutely.
But this desire to learn and try and grow as a person is something that's inherent in me. And I think it's really inherent in most people. I think that we really want to learn. People are passionate about it. If you look at preschoolers don't shy away from finger paints. They want to touch, they want to feel, they want to explore. So it's in our bodies, it's in our nature, but then society sometimes pushes it down. We get jobs where we're told, just do your job. How many of your listeners have been told that at some point? That's not part of your job, just do your job. I've even been told that at times within NASA, but at least if I come back and say, well, I understand this is outside of my scope, but in order for me to do my job the best I can, I need to learn more than just my job. Mm-hmm. I think that was also, as I say this, one of the reasons why I went to medical school. I was renewing my diving medical technician, my DMT cert. And I had a paramedic who was a lecturer out of a dive school in Long Beach. And I sat thinking, wow, this gentleman is one of the best lecturers I've heard. But also, it's very clear that his knowledge scope is really bounded by the paramedic scope of practice. And I wanted to know more. I heard him and I saw his passion, but I wanted to take that a step further. And the only way I could do that is to learn more and to grow more and to go to medical school. So I think that it's there, that drive is there, and I just didn't realize it. As I look back and I think, my goodness, here, look at my career. I was teaching here. I was running a CPR training center. I was working for the film and television studios, and I have a degree in theater. How does this all tie together? Last week, I was in the desert in Arizona, where I was working as a medical monitor when we were doing some work looking at lunar rover operations, working with the Japanese Aerospace Agency because they're wanting to build a lunar rover for the Artemis program. And I realized, what was I doing? I was doing exactly what I did for the film and television studios, event medicine, but at a much higher level, because now I'm a physician and I have much more knowledge and experience. And yet we're doing this for something that we're planning on and dreaming about and envisioning. Theater. When I was in theater, when I was at the Metropolitan Opera, Philip Glass was commissioned to do a piece called The Voyage, celebrating the 500th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of the New World. It was a futuristic piece. The designers wanted to learn about the space program, so I brought the team here to NASA. This was before I even thought about working at NASA, and had a red carpet treatment, and we got to learn about the future of the Lunar Mars project. And here I am working on a lunar and a Mars project. So
Wow.
even my time at the Metropolitan Opera is directly related to what I'm doing now. So it's fascinating. As I look back, there is no question that everything was about building up to be where I am now. And I don't think that it's coincidental. Obviously, I've been able to follow a passion and learn from all these different opportunities, take advantage of these different opportunities, and bring it together, and just from trial and error. And Kevin, I've had quite a few jobs in my day, but it's from trial and error that I found the right job and the right fit that has pulled in all of these opportunities and experiences.
Yeah. So that leads into my next question, which is, it seems to me that you haven't hesitated to do what I think many people would consider to be take steps back at times where either, I don't know, you saw you were going in a particular direction and didn't like that, or you somehow they almost sound strategic, and yet I again, what was the context that allowed you? Because I know this for myself. I find it very hard to think about. I'm at a certain position in my life now. The idea that I'm going to do something, less prestigious or whatever, it has at times really been difficult for me to deal with. And yet it seems like you've done that rather seamlessly. So I'm wondering if you would talk about that aspect of your professional life.
That is a great direction to go. And I think that we should take some time to talk about that. Taking a step back, less prestigious. Those are some words you used. And those words have very negative connotations. There's no question in society and in our thought processes. And that's something that I think we need to learn to break from, that taking a step back doesn't necessarily mean failure. Doing something that's not right, that isn't right for you, doesn't necessarily mean failure. I had mentioned there was a period of time where I followed a paycheck and took a job that I thought was the title of my dreams, thought it was the right job for me, and it was a terrible fit. The number of people I worked with who would literally open up and be in tears telling me about how unhappy they were with their jobs, but they had somehow convinced themselves that they had to stay. And that's really unfortunate. I think that if we understand that learning isn't always succeeding, isn't always doing the right thing. We both laughed and smiled at skydiving. We tried it. We didn't like it. But yet we both are very passionate about scuba diving and really enjoy that. Both of it's diving. So trying something that you don't like is just as important as trying something that you do like. let's think about foods. And I had Indian for lunch. This wonderful Himalayan restaurant. It's new. It's a young group of people that tried to make it in a different restaurant and came and formed this one. I think it's wonderful. I like going there. I like their story, but I also really like their food. For many years in my life, I said, "Oh, I don't like Indian food," but yet I'd never tried it. And then I was in New Zealand, going down to Antarctica one time, and the group went, and I had a choice. I could take my belief that I didn't care for a cuisine and miss out on a meal with a really fun group of people that certainly have impacted my life, or I could just bite the bullet and just whatever they're going to serve me, they're going to serve me, and I'll just go for it. And I learned that I really did like this cuisine. It's an incredible cuisine with tons of flavors, and each dish is wonderful flavors and spice that's spice for flavor, not heat for the sake of heat. And so again, it's okay to try and fail if we take the opportunity to learn from that experience. And so, yes, I've stepped back, but it's not stepped back, it's stepping back to the highway. You take this branch, the road less traveled, and if the road less traveled leads to a dead end, you just turn around, go to the highway, and go to the next off-ramp. And so I don't necessarily think of that as a bad thing. And as I look back, every job opportunity, every career, every job that I've been fired from, whether it's getting fired from the movie Castaway or from a dive shop, or taking a job that wasn't the right fit when I was in Minnesota. These things have all helped me grow because I've taken the opportunity to learn from those experiences as I've moved forward in my career.
Interesting. I mean, it's, we've known each other for a long, long time, and it's extremely valuable to hear how the things I say and the thoughts that I have are, how you process them. So, when I say, taking a step back, I can hear how that sounds negative when you say it. And yet so then I have to think about this, obviously in some ways I'm processing it as a negative thing. And yet I don't tend to look at life in that kind of negative way, right? So I think sometimes we're not even aware of how loaded the words that we're using are with respect to how we craft our lives.
No question. And that's that exact point that I'm getting at, is that, right, we have to take steps back. You take a step forward, you hit a wall, you can't move forward. So you have to take a step back so that you can move forward in another direction. And I agree, and I understand how you visualize that and where the words, what was intended by the question. But as we sit and listen to those words, we have to realize what the impact means. And yet that impact isn't a bad thing. When we talk about life in general, foods, cuisines, tasting, I don't care much for mustard. That's okay. I don't like mustard on my ham sandwiches, but it's a good thing that I've tried it.
I never knew that about you. I've got like 10 mustards in my refrigerator. I love mustard.
There you go. But it's great in the sloppy Joe mix that we make at home. You need mustard, and it's great in a lot of different, as a spice, but just not on my ham sandwich.
Not on your ham sandwiches. Okay, there you go. Well, you don't have to worry about me serving that when you come over. So
True.
So I don't want to give short shrift to what you're doing now. I mean, the idea of working with astronauts to walk, on another planet or walk in space. I mean, on some level, it's just so mind-blowing to even think about doing that, and then to be the one who, I don't know of anyone I've ever spoken to who said, when I grow up, I want to teach astronauts to be able to walk in space, right? It's just, it's not in anybody's ken to do that. So talk to me, if you would, but like, how did, you mentioned, you this opportunity kind of came along, but how is it that you had it in your some, I only have a Yiddish word, kishkas. How did you have it inside of you to think, I can do this? And there's no school you go to, as far as I know, training to, school to train people to walk, on the moon. So talk to me about that. I'm very curious about that.
So first of all, I am a physician, and I make sure they do things healthy. I don't actually do the training directly, although there is some training that I am directly involved in. And it's interesting because so many of the young people that I work with did grow up always saying, I want to work with the space program. I want to be a trainer for the space program. And they do, and they study aerospace engineering. And so there are pathways, but those people obviously are few and far between that are the pathways that say from day one, this is what I want to be. And I mean, let me ask you this, Kevin. When we were young and having our youthful antics together, would you have thought, gee, I want to host a YouTube TV show or a YouTube video show and podcast, and I'm going to have such a good following that I'm going to have my 100th episode is going to be with a good friend of mine? I mean, who would have thought of that? YouTube didn't even exist when we were in college. So there is no question that it's more about these opportunities and learning what's out there. I went to a high school where you were a doctor, lawyer, politician, movie star, or disappointment. I mean, those were your 5 choices.
Sorry, I know lots of high schools like that, right?
Right, exactly. And yet the careers that are out there, I'd mentioned this earlier, my wife was a crime scene investigator for LAPD. There's a whole TV show, not only TV show, but a whole franchise of TV shows that's about crime scene investigation, but we didn't know about it when we were growing up. So this is one of the frustrations that I have in our educational world, that we don't get exposed to all these incredible opportunities that are out there. And I think more people would be passionate about the space program if we did do a better job of exposing them. Now, I'll admit, I had the seed planted early on in medical school when I wanted to do a diving medicine rotation. I love diving. I wanted to learn more about diving medicine, but no one wanted med students. They only wanted residents because of the insurance, the malpractice insurance. We'll be realistic. This is the world we live in. You want to touch a patient, you need malpractice insurance. So that, the med schools, they pay for the malpractice insurance. The residencies, when you're a resident, you come with that. So, okay, I couldn't do diving medicine, but I really love the physics of diving. So, can't go down, might as well go up. Look into space medicine. And lo and behold, there was a clerkship, a month-long training program in aerospace medicine at Johnson Space Center. Well, I'll go ahead and apply to that. Very competitive, but I had taken enough opportunities, learned enough about, I'll use the word alternobaric, change in pressure. So this is high pressure environments, that all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, we'd be very interested in having you come work in our program, and got to spend a month with one of the probably foremost decompression researchers in the country at the time, Johnny Conkin, and looking at gender differences in decompression risk, and really had a great opportunity and took this further forward to help me get involved in aerospace medicine and learn about this whole field that existed. And I had no idea this even existed. I mean, even in medical school, there wasn't really, in my school, there wasn't an aerospace medicine residents and med students interest group. Wasn't talked about. Certainly wasn't a diving medicine interest group either. And I tried, but I couldn't get anyone interested besides me. So learning about these things, it was always there, and always, God, this is great. This is so fascinating. But I had this drive in this direction that I should be going in diving medicine. So it was always like this, just this little voice in my head said, don't forget, don't forget. And I was having a very tiresome, frustrating day at in Minnesota, and thinking, I just wonder what jobs are out there. Let's just daydream, you know? Let's not accept that my future may not be one that brings me joy and happiness and have time for family, time for volunteerism. And lo and behold, there was a job posting. NASA was looking for flight surgeons. And so I, of course, applied, even though I had a job. I'm like, well, what the heck? I'm frustrated. I might as well just send in an application. A couple days later, I had another very frustrating day, and I'm like, let's just daydream. And I couldn't find that ad anymore. It was nowhere. So, right, I looked all over for it. Like, did I dream this? I mean, I go into my email, I sent out an application. And so once again, this take advantage of opportunities. Wow, if I didn't apply that day, that night, even though I had a job, even though I wasn't certain I would be leaving, this opportunity never would have come up. But it did. And I sent it in, and 9 months later, there's stories there, I ended up moving to Houston and starting with NASA. So I think that a lot of it really just comes to, you don't always know where things are going to be, but try, learn, see what excites you, see what you're passionate about. Because honestly, there's nothing more that we can ask for in a job than to have passion for it. Mm-hmm. And it may be 10 years down the road.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears on you a little bit. I had another very long-standing friend of mine on the show a few months ago. He happens to be in the business world, I know Christine is not here. He was actually on a trip with his wife, so his wife joined us in the meeting, and I actually had known her. I met her shortly before I met him. They weren't married at the time, and they've really had a remarkable marriage partnership for, gosh, I think 40 some odd years at this point. And I've known you and Christine. Well, I was at your wedding, right? So I've known you really your whole married life, and I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about what is it like to lead what I think some people would call a somewhat peripatetic life while you're married, right? So you have this other person in your life that you have to be concerned about, whose happiness, at least in part, rests with the decisions you make for your own life. Not to mention Kimmy, right? Of course, you have a child. Kimmy will eventually grow up and leave the nest, right? But presumably, with our spouses, we're that's hopefully going to be, enduring. So would you talk about how I'm not looking to get into any personal stuff, of course, but how do you contextualize making sure that you're fulfilling yourself while at the same time keeping your marriage intact? Because I think a lot of married people struggle with that.
In general, I think just a lot of married people struggle. What percentage of marriages don't succeed? And I think a big part of that is, do we really know who we are at 22, 26, 28, whatever age it is? Because again, let's be realistic, most first marriages are likely in the 20s. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest issues, is if we don't know who we are, and wow, we discover who we are and it's in conflict when our partner discovers who he or she is, that can just create a lot of strife. In my case, Christine was someone who has an adventurous spirit as well. We met scuba diving. We didn't meet in a bar. We didn't meet in, you know, not that there's anything negative about meeting in church, but church brings so many different people together that yes, they have a basic foundation, but they might be very different people. So we met in an somewhat unusual setting to begin. She also worked in law enforcement. She was a crime scene investigator. So she had this other side to her where she did take call, where she was working some at weekends and holidays. So she already had a job that meant I always had to share her with a job. So that helps when all of a sudden she has to share me with a job as well. We started dating. 3 months after we started dating, I went down to Antarctica for 3 months in a time when there was no just picking up a phone. It was $10 a minute if you needed to make a call. So there weren't phone calls, and it was 3 weeks to send mail back and forth. So we already from the very beginning had to have an understanding about that. She has an adventurous spirit. Let's talk about going to medical school, because things became very different when all of a sudden you need to pack up your life, move halfway across the country, and all of a sudden have a job, medical school, but a job that takes up 200, 300, 400% of your life. And there just isn't room for another person. That is a very hard time, and there are many marriages that don't succeed, medical school, graduate school in general, for that reason. So when it was decided that indeed I wanted to go to medical school and I had this opportunity in Chicago, I sat down and I said with her, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to uproot your life, you need to write down your goals and present and let me see them. Let's put them on paper. Let's make it important. And she thought, what were her professional goals? And she gave me a list. And so now it became not only my responsibility to myself, but my responsibility as part of this relationship to see to it that I support her goals happening as well as mine. Now, at the time, she thought they were somewhat lofty goals, but because she also has an adventurous spirit and willing to say yes to opportunity, not quite at the level that I do, not the insanity of my life, but she was willing to at least try, that all of a sudden, in the next 5 years, she achieved every single one of her goals and then some. Now, that presented its own problem in what do we do next, but it really kept things going and helped our relationship remain very strong, because I could help her. I could at least introduce her to people that could help make her opportunities come true. And the medical school I went to was the perfect medical school for her to come in and get a research position. And she got her own grant and got to do work, and then got recognized at the National Institute of Justice and got to do some national, even some international training and teaching and work. And so really it was a partnership, and never forgetting that that relationship is a partnership. And we've been able to do that, but not only professionally, but also on personal lives too. This summer, my daughter wanted to take a leadership course through Scouting. She's involved in Scouts BSA. And of course, we're going to support that. But then we find ourselves for a week without a child. What did we do? We went down to Mexico and took a cave diving course, which is probably getting to some of the most extreme technical diving out there. And our final dive, we went a mile deep underground, underwater for over 140 minutes, where we used more air than you could even carry with 2 tanks. So we had to take a 3rd tank, and you drop it off halfway in the cave and continue on with the 2 tanks, come back, pick it up to find your way out. So it's also making sure that I listen to her needs, and that we're a partnership, and that we find where our interests and passions merge and come together and follow them together.
So And as I'm listening to you
Oops,
talk about
I've
that,
lost you. Are you
oh,
hearing me?
yes, I am.
Sorry.
You
For
don't
some reason, your sound is kicked off. Let me make sure that nothing's happened on my end. Nope, I'm still having sound. Um, let's check your microphone for a moment, and my apologies to the viewers.
my mic shows that I'm
Definitely
live.
not hearing you.
Okay.
Your lips move,
Well,
but I can't hear what they're saying.
okay.
Sorry. I guess I
Well,
shouldn't cite songs. Now you're going to have to call ASCAP and give them rights, right?
there you go.
So not sure how we want to handle this. Do you want me to log out and log back in? Do you want
No,
to?
we're almost done. We've only got 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay.
So I'm going to wrap up anyway.
Oh, you're going to wrap everything up. Okay. Well, thank
Exactly.
you. I'm going to read lips as best I can and turn it over to you, Kevin.
Hang in here with me. I want to make one observation. Unfortunately, you can't hear it, but I'll share it with the viewers. One of the through ideas for, if you listen carefully to how Bob has spoken about his career and his marriage, is the value he places on relationships. And it is something that I do my best to emphasize in this show as well. I think that you can see that Bob's success as a professional and as a husband and father all boils down to how he values people and relationships with people. It's one of the reasons why we've been friends for, I think, over 4 decades now. We both have that. And so that's kind of a parting idea for all of you. I wish Bob could hear this. I'm gonna put in the chat. This is what I put in the chat, was what I was just commenting on. So why don't you maybe give us 2 minutes? We can hear you, so just give us 2 minutes. Right. Yep. Yep. So
that's right. I don't have to respond by typing. My apologies.
No,
Closing
it's okay.
thoughts. Really, the opportunities, the growth that I've had in my career, even this new position, really are exactly what we talked about in the first episode, and just saying yes to opportunity. But understanding that we don't live in a bubble, and friends are there to help us. Taking the opportunity to say yes to the help that friends may offer. So many of us want to do things ourselves. I remember my daughter growing up, I can do it, Daddy, I can do it myself. Coming out of the military, many people who have built their careers and working with people I see, they really feel, gee, I want to do this on my own. I need to do this on my own. Somehow we've gotten into the idea that asking for help or taking advantage of help is a sign of weakness, and it's not. It's a sign of strength. We talked a lot about volunteerism, the rewards we get from helping others. That's when you ask for help, you give somebody else an opportunity to succeed as well. And so it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, it's a sign of community, it's a sign of being open to relationships, it's a sign of being open to others. And together we have these opportunities. I'd say that my jobs, my life, my world has been that sort of merger of coming together.
Well, and I'm gonna let that be the final words, because that segues beautifully. I always sign off saying the same thing, paying tribute to a friend of mine who helped me and I helped her. It was one of the most wonderful, mutually supportive relationships I ever had. And that is to say, Marie, darling, you are still my Belle. So please join me next week for the Way to Wow show. Again, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, even though you can't hear me, to my guest, Dr. Bob Sanders. It's just always just so great to talk to you. And a lot of times when we're just talking, we don't talk about these kind of things. We just talk about our lives, kind of what's going on. So it's wonderful to have these with you, and look forward to just catching up with you again real soon. Give my best to Christine and Kimmy, and have a wonderful rest of the week, Bob, and for all of you out there. Thanks so much.
And I'm not sure we're still on, but thank you for this opportunity.
The recording has stopped.
Okay. It told me the recording has stopped. I hear that. I don't know what happened. They just silenced you.
Yeah, maybe not a bad thing.
You know, if I had the power to silence you, that'd be kind of powerful. I kind of like that. But yeah, it doesn't work like that in life, does it?
It does.
But I think we pulled it off.
We did.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I enjoyed that. Soon. And that was really good. I think that was a good secondary one where we spent a little less time talking about hard work and more about opportunities. I like that. I think that went very smoothly. Yeah. Nice questions.
It was great. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. Take care, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Mm-hmm.